left from my right.
Now here's the thing about me that's a secret that most people don't know. I'm borderline retarded and I can't read. These books that you're recommending, Goethe. I would pick that up and I would be like, 10 minutes later, I'd be like, what's my favorite song? The ABCs?
I think we're kind of getting off topic. Can you name 10 books?
Keep going back to me. Can you?
No, don't change.
No.
10 books.
You're changing the subject, actually.
10 books.
You're changing the subject,
okay,
actually.
3 books.
Okay. Well, the Game of Thrones series,
not a book.
Twilight series.
It
is a book.
Reading makes you sick, and reading makes you die!
All right. If people notice something a bit different here, you're just tuning in now, you'll notice there's a couple of extra pillows on the couch. There's a couple of candles that have been lit. It's because we have a guest. Never had this experience before on Do You Even Read? We have the author, the book that we're going to be covering in just a little bit, and we're opening with that, if you can believe it. Prudentialist. What's going on?
Happy to be here. This is a first for the show. I hope chat will be on their best behavior. We like to champion ourselves as the world's foremost pro-illiteracy podcast. So I think it's a really special opportunity to have the author of said book that we're reviewing on. I think that it's also important to let our friends know that at Good Suffer, your wonderful store, we have merchandise for Do You Even Read, which I'm going to try my best to get a hold of and shipped over down there, Do You Even Read shirt, because I'll probably talk about Do You Even Read. I have somewhere special to go on June 5th. I'll leave it as a surprise, but I'll be wearing that shirt. I'm going to certainly try to. But yeah, no, this is the first for us. I think we've got a great book, and we not to can Oren McIntyre's intro, but we have a great guest with a great stream I think you're really going to enjoy.
Yeah, so I want the chat to be on their best behavior. I don't want to hear about any fucking spines. I don't want to hear about any, flim-flam in the chat. We're going to put our best face forward for this guest, you fucking savages. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Jeremy, Grayson, Dovin, lad, we're all retarded.
That is true. We're a little special. We're all a little special around here. But with that being said, Grayson Quay, welcome to the Do You Even Read? As I mentioned, the pro illiteracy podcast on the internet. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for taking the time to talk about your book.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here, and I saw the first few chats, and don't worry, we're all on the same level. I also cannot read. I captured a literate Greek during one of my raids, and made him sit in my yurt, and I dictated this book to him. So,
see, he has the power to read, but he refuses to, and that's the real power. That's what we like. I want people to be speed readers, but don't. And that's where the vivacity of spirit and the gumption of balls comes from. Now, I got a question for you, Grayson. I have an idiot's question. And you got to get used to that. Is the last name pronounced Quay or Key?
See, I don't think that's an idiot's question. I think that's like an aristocratic question. I feel like it looks like Quay, so you're going to get Quay from the far end of the bell curve, but the literati who know what a key is are going to ask me that question. It is Quay, but it should probably be Key, but it's just for long familial reasons.
I like Quay, and I live up here in Canada, and so I don't know if it's a regional pronunciation thing, but I was pronouncing Quay my whole life, and someone said actually it's Key, and they tried to make a fool out of me, and I've carried that with me ever since. This was in my 20s when this happened, of course. So I'm just going to pull up the book here just quickly. Is it not? There it is. Okay. So what are we talking about? What are we even doing here? We're talking about the transhumanist temptation, how technology and ideology are reshaping humanity, and how to resist.
I had to laugh that the cover photo was made with Midjourney, and I appreciate you putting that in the acknowledgments.
Yeah, that was my publisher's decision. They sent me the image, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool," and I didn't realize it was AI at first. And then I saw that when I first got the advanced copies, and was like, "Oh, huh." I also like that it could sort of be like an unauthorized Twilight sequel. Like I've thought about taking a copy
that
to a
works
bookstore
way
and just
more than it
shelving next
should.
to Twilight.
It looks very romantically brooding. It says the wrong message about the book. I'm like, this. I mean, this is something I really want to crack open and get steamy with, but that's the wrong energy to go into this book with. But I think this might be the first book that we've covered on the show, and correct me if I'm wrong, that deals with transhumanism, which is a topic that has dominated most of the discourse for as long as I can remember. In fact, we had a debate about just this very topic in so many ways in Prudentialist's chat the other day. It was centered around data centers, but it's pretty much the same thing. And when it comes to AI, and also, I'll just tee it up with this because my personal background in this, I probably mentioned this on the show before, but many years ago, I work in marketing and advertising. I had a client at one point that was dealing in what they called the longevity movement. And that's this international movement that gathers together a lot of nonprofits and for-profit companies and scientists from many different countries for one purpose. And they're very open about this purpose. And Mark Zuckerberg is involved, and Elon Musk is involved. Any billionaire you could think of is involved because the goal is to cure death. That's what they say. Mm-hmm. And they think they're doing a righteous, benevolent thing. And in fact, I would argue that is the raison d'etre for the entire medical industry. Go to any doctor, any surgeon, you say, would you like to remove pain from the human experience? They would say yes. Would you like to prevent death? They'd say yes. In fact, perhaps all medical technology is building towards that. So the longevity movement is this, it's a matrix of different pursuits on how to cure death and make humanity live forever. And to the tune of billions and billions of dollars investment. Think of any old billionaire that wouldn't be hurling money at this. You think Warren Buffett's not putting money in this? You're dreaming. So that seems to be the reason this is so interesting is, aside from ideology, even spirituality, why people keep returning to this is because I think we get the sense that it is happening because all of the most important people in the world, this is kind of the only thing they think is really important. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, all of them, any fucking cartel bosses, if they can, are getting involved in this somehow, right? Like anyone who has money wants to live forever, it seems to me. And so we get the sense like this is moving with a momentum that I don't know if the average person can even do anything about it. And so I'm curious to Prude and Grayson, what do you think about that little tee up there?
You're up, Grayson. Go for it.
Sure. Yeah. I do have a chapter about the kind of radical life extension thing, which is interesting. So, yeah, I'll respond to that chat real quick. The eternal boomer Reich is one like interesting complication that comes up. Is, are we just going to have an entire society of King Charleses where you wait around until you're 78 or however old he was before you finally get your first promotion, because everyone above you is 146 years old and refuses to retire because they're all still, they all still have the physique of an 18-year-old or whatever Brian Johnson's trying to do. This is everywhere. I mean, I remember a news story where Putin and Xi Jinping were like having a meeting and like a hot mic picked them up, like bantering back and forth kind of about radical life extension and, imagining that they were going to live until they were 130 or something like that. So it's something that powerful people are really into. In the transhumanist movement, just to like, if you want to like chase down kind of the intellectual roots of this in the transhumanist movement, Aubrey de Grey is one of them. He has a whole thing where if you can live to, I think he may have revised this was back in like the 2000s that he was saying this, but if you could live to like 2040, you could expect to just live forever, because he sort of foresaw a treatment that would just sort of like take 20 years off for you. So you could just go in and get that every so often and just, you don't have to knock the Grim Reaper out. You just have to kind of like stay ahead of him. And then there's a guy named Gennady Stolyarov who wrote a this bizarre, macabre children's book called Death is Wrong. And he's the chair of, I think, the Transhumanist political party, which is a thing that exists. If you're interested in delving into that. And I did a debate with him a while ago that was pretty interesting, I think. It went on for a very, very long time. I wanted to go to bed for about the last half of it, but I think we got some interesting stuff hashed out. One interesting kind of counterpoint to the radical life extension thing is that it necessarily brings in assisted suicide. Because if you're, you know, this deathless demigod, sort of the question is like, well, if you have, you know, truly sampled all of life's pleasures and finally become bored, you know, a lot of these transhumanists say like, oh, well, you'll never get bored. Ray Kurzweil says like, oh, you know, your brain will be so enhanced that you'll be able to think like 12-dimensional thoughts, and you'll just never get bored, like contemplating your own brilliance as this enlightened, you know, being. But if you do get bored and you don't want to live anymore after 10,000 years or whatever, like you do, you know, that option has to be there because that's the only way left for you to die. So it's interesting.
Just at that point, I want to mention...
let me just wrap up my point. Sorry. This is kind of one of the most slippery ones. Like there's a lot of transhumanist technologies where it's very easy to say like, oh, just don't do that. Like just don't upload your brain to the cloud, bro, and you'll be fine. Like it's kind of very binary. With this, it's interesting because like we've sort of had a radical life extension already in the sense that like average life expectancy has doubled, you know, roughly over the last 200 years. Most of that due to reduction in child mortality. You know, people lived to their 80s in the 1800s too. But if we could like bump that up, if like medicine just got better at fixing stuff that broke down in our bodies, there's no reason we couldn't get that up to like 90s or 100. And that's not like, you know, a transhumanist thing, right? Like medicine fixing your body as it breaks down is, you know, within the teleological natural law tradition, right? It's like you fix what is broken and restore it to the functioning and the flourishing proper to it. I think that I think the important thing is to keep that as sort of a nice byproduct of getting better at medicine, to focus on treating diseases and not to focus on radical life extension. And if we get life extension thrown in, you know, if we are all like Moses in Deuteronomy, right? Vigor unabated and eyes undimmed at 120, you know, that's a nice perk. Sorry.
No, I had to just point there that you had brought up the idea of living amongst the stars and living forever and just contemplating your own thoughts. What I notice about a lot of the people who advocate for this, and there's many of them cited in your book, and there's obviously the Transhumanist Party, and I've known a couple futurist parties that are dabbling in that as well. But whenever they're projecting the future, I would even accuse Ray Kurzweil of doing this, of never being able to think past the singularity. And they think, no, we'll just be perfect. And it becomes science fiction. And not only that, it becomes bad science fiction. It becomes like they just start writing what things that they think would be cool. It's a realm of no negativity or negative consequences at all. And like this is very reductive. I remember reading Mark Andreessen's Tech Optimist Manifesto a long time ago, and I covered it on our paywall show. And Mark Andreessen is a very serious man. He's highly intelligent, but it's one of the dumbest things you're ever going to read. Like this is really stupid. And I'm really upset that he wrote this. Where he's just like, we should try being optimistic because like, what? Don't you want things to be cool? Aren't you cool? Don't you want to like? Wouldn't it be great to mine asteroids for fucking, you know, sex? Like it's just like yeah, at that point you could just like make shit up and like I guess, but what are we talking about here? And so, but I see that across the board. I've seen people talk about, you know, we gotta get into space. Why? So we can mine copper. I'm like, is that what's holding us back with innovation? So we don't have enough fucking iron ore.
We're just gonna mine copper. We're just gonna be intergalactic meth heads.
Yeah, like what resource do we actually really need right now aside from, I don't know, cows? You know, the resources like we actually need. There's no asteroid with fucking wheat on it, assholes. But you know, anyway. So long story. I wanted to I had a question for you, and Prudentialist, feel free to shut me off if I'm if you got.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
But there's always this question I had when I was approaching this topic, and this can be a pretty deep question, but you know, if you are anti-transhumanist, as this book is, I believe, I think that's a fair assessment. You can disagree if you like, but I think it's a sort of a treatise against transhumanism. But what transhumanism is, which is what we were just discussing, is the idea of like living in supreme power forever. Like that's almost the end point, right? So to be against that, do you need to be pro-death? Is that an argument that people need to be prepared to make? For my money, it's yes, and there's a way to do it, but I'm curious to hear what you would say.
Well, I'm not pro-death because I think that 2,000 years ago in the land now known as Palestine, a carpenter walked out of a tomb and ascended into heaven 40 days later, enthroning human nature at the right hand of God and freeing us all from the shackles of death. So I'm certainly not pro-death, no.
Well, I suppose for just the average people, not just Christ, but like would this be something that, let's say, God would advocate for? Like you ought not be pursuing eternal life. You need to make a positivistic case for death because everyone has that secret, perhaps dark desire to live forever. No one wants to die, and maybe we've never. I don't want to say we've never reconciled that. I bet many hundreds of years ago people were more accustomed to it, and we're just terrified of it now. We live in a secular humanist paradigm, but it's not removing that from the conversation, not pretending that that's not there, or trying to say like it's actually better for you to die and leave subsequent generations carrying it on, and can make even a biological argument for that, but also maybe a spiritual one. Like it is your destiny to die, and that's good in a way, or that's, you see what I'm saying?
Well, I think there's a number of kind of pragmatic arguments you can make. One is that the one I made earlier, kind of the Prince Charles argument that you don't make room for future generations to sort of come up and make their own way in the world. Another one is just that I think would end up with people stuck in kind of an eternal adolescence. If you've heard of like the Villages community in Florida, I talk about this community there where these people have, they're all old, they're all retirees, but they, thanks to modern medicine, have kind of a longer health span than you would have in previous generations, and they all talk pretty openly about not wanting to take on the role of being like a patriarch or a matriarch within their family. Like they wanted to leave their family and leave their grandchildren and just go like live like frat bros and sorority girls for the last 20 years of their life. And so I think you'd end up with a lot more of that, a lot more of people not sort of embracing the responsibilities of each subsequent stage in life. But yeah, I think a lot of this stuff is still hypothetical at this point. Like there's, no one has yet lived to be, 150 or whatever. And again, this is an area where I think it's perhaps hardest to draw a hard line. If we end up extending the average lifespan of humans somewhat, I don't have a problem with it necessarily. I think that it is a question of motivation, that the pursuit of eternal life on solely human terms is, kind of an affront to God and is going to lead us into kind of a hell of our own making if we pursue that.
Yeah, and I like to speculate wildly on these sorts of things just like everyone else does. So I really took the question seriously. What would it be like to live to 500 years old? As you said, no one's done it. And it just seems clear to me that if you live to be that long, and this is part of the longevity movement that I was talking about, where it's actually not as difficult as you would think to make cells regenerate, like the cells in your body. You can make your body live forever, but they don't know how to cure Alzheimer's. They don't really know what's going on mentally and psychologically. So yeah, the body's almost the easy part. It's the mind that's this total black box. And so what you find is that, okay, let's say you could hypothetically solve for that. Okay, if you're living to 500 years, you've gone through so many lifetimes, you're not really the same person as when you started. You're an entirely different person. And like, let's say, oh, I'm not even living on Earth anymore. I'm on Mars. I'm amongst the stars. Like, you're not human. You're something else. So I always found that to be at the core of transhumanism, as if it were an extension of humanism, or being human rather. I'm like, no, it's you becoming inhuman. That's the end point of this. And I really think people miss that because they never really thought about what that would be like, really. But if you haven't thought about it, how could you fucking be in favor of it? But it's like like I said, it's something dark and strange that lives inside of us. It's just we feel we need to do it. We feel that that's the purpose in life. It's to defeat death. There's people who committed their entire careers to trying to conquer death, and they think they're the good guys. You can't tell them that they're not the heroes of that story. It's maybe the only thing that human beings should be doing, according to them. And so, I don't know. That's why I asked about the positivistic argument for death. I'm like, I don't think a lot of people even heard that, because no way people have even thought about what's it like to be a 500-year-old person flying through space. You know.
Yeah. Well, I think that your point about like you become something else is well taken, and I kind of have three kinds of arguments against transhumanism in my book. So one is sort of on an explicitly Christian plane, looking at the kind of Old Testament and apocryphal stories of the Nephilim and stuff like that, which is really fun. I'm not going to go into all that right now. I have sort of the natural law argument, which is very much kind of compatible with the Christian tradition one, where I kind of go into Aristotle and try and convince people that like human beings have a nature. We ought to, attempt to flourish according to that nature and not to change it. But then, if you don't believe in God and you don't believe in natural law, like I kind of sort of offer this third argument, which is a very utilitarian one, which is just like if we set off on this course, like, as you said, we're not going to be human anymore. We're going to be something else. We're going to be something of our own making. And by our, I don't mean all of us collectively. I mean the elites and technologists who control these technologies. You will not control these technologies. They will be controlled by people who do not necessarily have your best interests at heart. And all of the collected wisdom of humanity will be useless to you. And any wisdom you collect in your lifetime will be useless to your children. You will be alone in the dark, just trying to feel your way, and it will be frightening. You'll have my God, like we're already living through this crisis in society where people are lacking like social scripts, where people don't know what they're supposed to do. And I think that's at the root of a lot of, mental illness and depression and just kind of failure to go out and make one's way in the world. Marriage ages are going later and later. And I think that this sort of civilizational identity crisis would only be exacerbated in a transhumanist society.
All right, that's a very good point. Hold on a second, because I'm about to lose it. We got Big Ben here. That was a very gay argument. You best not be talking about my very thoughtful, thing I just did.
Endorsement of death.
I said a lot of good things. I said a lot of smart things. I think we're all in agreement. I think everyone in the chat's been loving it.
Well, I think that, chat's going to have fun with it, but you are coming, the book, obviously, you don't hide the fact that you're a Christian at all. Which, not a problem for the argument at hand, but these are two fundamentally different, epistemic frameworks that are going to be to look at. And for, I think, a lot of futurists or technology appreciators, or even those that are heavily involved in the tech sector that want to live forever, the concept that in which we die, but we all expect on the last day the bodily resurrection. Those things aren't comprehended, and if anything, these are a lot of arguments I hear from, technologically, pro, maybe like the Mark Andreessens of the world or things like that, where it's just like these things may have been explanations from a prior time to make sense of death, right? The sort of like social evolutionary psychology argument for religion. And now you're encountering a world where, this is possible. And I think that, some of the points that Dimes were making as well as you, it's like we haven't really fully had a chance to explore this because no one's done it. And the only things that we really have as effective reference are, one, religion, and then two, our entire catalog of sort of science fiction on the subject. So everything from that awful Justin Timberlake film In Time, where everyone's got life that can live forever, but you only have X amount of like minutes or hours that you work for time. That's what the whole currency in the future. And you can die just like that. And people have been living for centuries because they have unlimited amount of time. Like there's a very real class argument that like I think is very true. Because if people are already skeptical of, Anthropic or anything like that now, I'd be far more concerned about the 150-year-old or like the 500-year-old Sam Altmans of the future that have no concept of what it means to live at best 70 years and be in strength 80. That world wouldn't fundamentally be around for them. And then everyone from their own fictional writings has tried to explore, well, what happens if death were as a concept, as a biological termination of the cessation of life were to disappear? What do we do? Well, then you have the Alzheimer's question. You have, what do we do with all these bodies that are decrepit or don't die, but they're still somewhat technically there? Do we just give them a pill to sleep forever and bury them that way, put them in like a casket timeshare? All these questions sort of get interrogated, right? But like we don't have an actual argument for it. But at the same time, Dimes and I haven't actually explicitly mentioned transhumanism, but as much as the chat likes to meme and remind us that we've covered spinal catastrophism, even Thomas Moynihan is arguing in a very weird transhumanist lens that our technology is a way in which we escape the trauma of suffering and of existing, and that each new technology brings about new kinds of pain that we then invent new technology to escape from. Like the Victorian era had like railway spine, this like strange catatonic mix of headaches, fatigue, seizures, stiffening up, because the human body was not necessarily prepared to deal with the acceleration of being on a train. And at the same time, if we were to say, the world I live in today with my John D. scrying mirror that's in my pocket at all times, my cell phone, and my entire worldview of technology and my understanding of the world around me is going to be vastly different than, say, my great-grandparents. I mean, like the people who grew up at the turn of the 20th century, they may look at me and not think that I'm human. They may not, the same thing with those at the beginning of the American founding. Like the way that I live would be so fundamentally anti-human to maybe their like conceptualization of that term that we're sort of left to do it. And I'm probably going to play more devil's advocate throughout our conversation, just because I think of Man and Technics a lot when I was reading this book. I was just thinking to myself, well, it's technics is not to be understood in the terms of the implement. What matters is not how one fashions things, but what one does with them, not the weapon, but the battle. And I think that kind of plays a lot into my mind when I'm reading this, because on one hand, for instance, at the beginning of the book, you make a lot of arguments about like brain-computer interface and like how, a lot of these early transhumanist adopters would focus on the most socially palatable cases. Like, well, why wouldn't we want the quadriplegic man to like have a brain chip and an exoskeleton that makes him human again? Like, why wouldn't we want to do that? And it's like, I understand where you're coming from, because when we look at what was it? Griswold v. Connecticut, right? The famous case that was explicitly about this invented right to privacy for married couples to use birth control inside their domicile. That's 1963. And the dissenting, I think it's like Justice Potter, I think he says like, well, couldn't this logic also be used for abortion? And the rest of the justices were like, no, that could possibly happen. And then 10 years later, we get abortion. So I'm totally sympathetic to the slippery slope argument, but at the same time, it's just where do you, I guess, in your arguments, but also since the book has been released, where do you sort of draw that line on, where is this going to be implemented? Because to me, it's the same thing where it's like, nuclear weapons and nuclear war is a really bad thing. It's never been experienced, but I don't want it to happen. But also, like, nuclear weapons are never going away.
Yeah, so I knew when I wrote this book there was just like no way to do it without getting accused of being a Luddite, but futilely I do want to defend myself.
For the record,
against
I'm
that
not calling
charge.
you a Luddite.
No, I don't
I'm
think
just,
you are. I just
yeah,
mean
yeah.
that like the like techno optimist people are always going to call me a Luddite. I don't think I'm like inherently pessimistic about technology. I don't live a particularly like Luddish lifestyle really. The way I think about it is an illustration G.K. Chesterton used, where if you imagine kind of children playing on a sort of an island that's just kind of juts up from the ocean, and there's just sheer cliffs on either side, and it's a 500-foot drop, and you'll die. If you have a fence around, this is like the other Chesterton's fence argument. If you have a fence around the perimeter of this island, the kids can play as rough as they want. They can close their eyes and play Marco Polo and do whatever they want. If you take that away, and come back, they'll all be kind of huddled in the middle of the island, terrified because, if you try to play rough without these guardrails, you're going to fall off and die. And I think that our sort of the philosophical framework we're using is that lack of a guardrail, right? We've embraced this very kind of existentialist, transhumanist mindset where we think that existence precedes essence. We think that, there is no human nature really to which we kind of owe anything. We think that it's the will is sort of to be a person is to be just kind of this free floating will that may in fact need to like impose itself upon biology if it's not aligning with the will's desires. So just to give you an example, I liked what you said about the man in Technics thing, where, what matters is what we use it for, and we just don't have proper guardrails on how we use it. So I give an example in the book of artificial wombs, which is a technology I would support in situations where women went into labor early. And, there's often tragic cases where a woman goes into labor or, for some reason her pregnancy is life-threatening and labor needs to be induced well before the point of viability. And in that case, historically, the Christian teaching has been that that's kind of illicit means of saving the mother's life. It still treats the baby as a patient, even though there's no realistic chance of it surviving. It's not considered to be an abortion. But in that scenario with an artificial womb, that baby could live. And that would be really wonderful. But if we invented those artificial wombs tomorrow, I mean, we've tested them on sheep and stuff. We don't have like a viable version that works with human babies yet. Fortunately, if we invented those tomorrow, we know what would happen, right? You'd immediately have this class divide where, rich women would just be like, oh, great, I don't have to give birth anymore. Well, I mean, they already don't have to give birth. They just pawn it off on, surrogates in Ukraine or whatever. But at least the surrogates could get a break, I guess. But you'd immediately just have an entire class of people who would be reproducing entirely through these, pods in these warehouses and like, pounding mimosas at brunch and like FaceTiming their fetus.
Well, yeah, the point
really
is like
stuff. And then, then you could foresee a future where like it becomes increasingly stigmatized to carry a child in your own body, because it's not the pristine laboratory conditions where things can be monitored better and things like that. And then eventually perhaps we'd have kind of universal coverage for artificial wombs through Medicaid or something.
Yeah, well, using the abortion example, I think is most illustrative here because we've all seen what happens. So right now, those arguments that you had just proposed there, where it's about like, what about babies? What about dying children? That's how it's used to sort of wedge the door open, because who's going to disagree with that? Just like with abortion, what about all these women who are raped by their dads and impregnated by them? and then you realize that's like 0.5% of the total amount of people who get abortions.
Sorry,
And not,
I'm,
not,
I'm not smiling. It looks
No, it's okay.
terrible to the
Hey.
audience. I was thinking of the time that Joe Biden said women need abortions because they're being raped by their sisters. It was one of my favorite. It went so under the radar, but it's one of my favorite Biden moments.
Hey, we miss him. Because he's a lot different if you realize he's just running really good bits.
Yeah.
But it's like that's proposed as it becomes sort of a fringe case contrasted against what it actually is predominantly used for later. So you could propose artificial wombs, and who would be against that? Because who wants dead babies? But just speculate on how that could immediately be abused because it would, or be used,
and it would be abused because if we in my ideal world where we recovered like a robust natural law ethic, a robust natural law framework, it would be, that wouldn't even be thinkable, right? It would just like within medical ethics, it would just be like, yeah, that's for a healthy woman to carry a pregnancy, to outsource her pregnancy to an artificial gestation pod would just be a non-starter. It would be like, no, of course these pods are for emergency situations, because our job as doctors is to, help the human body flourish according to the, mode proper to it, not to sort of externalize the body's functions or, augment or alter or replace them in certain ways. But unfortunately we don't live in that world. So it's almost like I'd rather not have the technology, because I know how badly it's going to be abused.
No, I agree with that completely. And I'm also seeing where Prudentialist is coming from, because this is the nature of the discussion we were having in the chat the other day. It was on the topic of CRISPR, which is just gene editing, basically. Gene editing of babies. And everyone's against genetic engineering. That is transhumanism, of course. Everyone hears that and it sounds like cyberpunk horse hockey, something we should all be against. But then we're talking about revealed preference, that everyone says they would be against something like that, especially people on our side of the political spectrum. But what it comes down to, the revealed preference would be, let's say it's even two white people with brown eyes, and the doctor's asking, would you like your kid to have blue eyes? Bet they do it. Your kid's going to be 5'5". Would you like to do something about that? I bet they do. See, you can talk a big game all you want, but there is a sense of inevitability on a case-by-case basis where even the radically aligned against that sort of thing, they probably end up doing it anyway. And I don't know what to do about that. There's the ideology and there's the proclamations against it, but then it seems that just people kind of keep doing it, and that really is what gets it over the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think people are going to do eugenics to the degree that you allow them to, right? Like in places where, in lots of countries, like Down syndrome's been basically wiped out because there's no restrictions on, abortion in cases of fetal defects like that. So I think that you'll see that too. Pascal Meno-Gabri made an interesting point that I hadn't thought of at first, which is that, if you truly are going to give everybody access to CRISPR, you're opening the door to some deeply mentally ill woman who just wants a child with the worst disability she can think of, or the worst cocktail of disabilities of genetic disorders she can think of.
It'd be like bug chasing, but for crazy pregnant women.
Yeah. You don't have to do Munchausen by proxy. You can just give your kid that disease.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that. I think what Dives points out is true. I think most people, if given the choice, it's not going to be the Oblivion NPC, character creation screen where it's the most hideous people imaginable. I mean, people are going to probably select for aesthetic reasons. What I liked about Pascal's tweet that you had linked in your book that I thought was particularly interesting is that he's arguing from sort of the Paul Virilio, when we invent something, we also create the accident for it. Mm-hmm. And so that when we are selectively breeding, there are consequences to other traits or genes that we edit or we breed out. So I mean, there's still plenty about the human genome that we don't understand.
Yeah.
I mean, we have it pretty mapped out, but
Sure, but even if we like, even setting aside that argument that there'd be sort of unforeseen interactions of genes and stuff,
Sure.
that we might screw ourselves up as badly as we screwed up pugs, or something like that. Even if we could do it perfectly, that still, to me, really raises an issue. First of all, there's the class divide, but again, you can pretend that like, oh, there, universal access to CRISPR, right? It's free for everybody. Everybody has access to this genetic engineering. What frightens me there is that now you're in a situation where it's very, very hard to opt out. If everybody's IQ is 200, and everybody's 6'3" and looks like a model.
Uh-oh. We just lost him.
That's good. Everyone's 6'3" and looks like a model. Like where does that leave my own children? I'm certainly not going to do that to them, but maybe they can be janitors. I don't know. Like that's all that's like, it's this real Gattaca world that you end up in.
What's interesting, one thing I talk about Joseph de Maistre quite a bit, and his description of what sovereignty is. And when the topic would come up about what is a great man, which sounds gayer than it is, I promise you guys, a great man. What to look for in a great man, obviously. But I always described it as he is the man who is completely representative of his time and place. The man who's called forth to occupy the proximal zone of sovereignty, almost through forces unseen and almost pure context. And every great man is different than every other great man throughout history. And so what's interesting is, if we're gaming this out of how it could work, like you are separating people. They cannot live contextually. You're removing the context of being time and space. You can no longer have imagine every great man from history that was just still alive and hanging around. What a fucking disaster that would be. Like they need to be able to be locked within that time and space. They have no right to just live forever. I mean, how many of I want to go back to science fiction, how many of our stories I'm just thinking of Warhammer 40K right now, but the God Emperor, he's just hanging around. He's just a corpse that just gets more and more deified in time. And I'm like, that's some people think that's cool because it's retarded and we like retarded things. I get that, but that would be a consequence of it, of just all imagine Napoleon's just still here and doing podcasts. Now, no, he deserves to be dead in his time and space.
Well, to me, part of the question with CRISPR too is how do we love one another in that world? We were talking before the stream started. I just had my second little girl, and I don't think I could love her the way I do if I knew she was a product I ordered off the shelf, customized on an app, and then got the and then got this thing that I ordered that is reflective of traits that I wanted, traits that I find desirable, or that I've been sort of conditioned to find desirable by the marketing I'm exposed to, rather than a reflection of me and the person that I love, and then the people who loved each other who produced my wife and I. I don't think it's possible to love a child that you ordered the same way to love one that you loved into being.
Yeah, you made a very good point about that in the book, that plenty of famous celebrities have openly said that they have a much different feeling about the children they had via IVF or surrogacy in comparison to the ones that they actually bore in their wombs. And I think that that's a very prominent point, that there is the human connection is lost once I can basically build a baby in the same way I can go to Build-A-Bear and just make whatever I want. Because then, it's different than leaving this up to God's will, and what may be will be, and we'll just accept it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a more
Yeah.
extreme version of like when I see, you know, women who've had, you know, really intense plastic surgery in their face. And it's sad because it's like you used to look like your mother, and now what do you look like? You know, you look like every other, you know, girl on Instagram with a lot of followers. It's just very sad.
You know, I had one question, and I know we may have a immediate timer on this because he might need to run because of his child calling to him. But I had this one question, as I was reading the book, and I wanted to ask you this. It occurred to me as we were defining what transhumanism is. It's not just about prolonging life, because you can get in the weeds on medical technology. You know, is a prosthetic limb transhumanism? You know, not to go down that road. There's this idea that it's not just about prolonging life; it's about maybe improving life or altering life in some way to fit your desires, rather than just to fit the medical needs. Which begs the question, in your opinion, is breast reduction surgery transhumanism?
Interesting question. Well, I've never thought about this before. I think that in a situation where you're genuinely being caused, you know, serious pain, as I know many women are, you know, I'm an ally, right? I think that in a situation like that, you could make a case for that surgery kind of being licit and in accordance with like one's flourishing according to one's human nature. Sure. Augmentation, I'd say, is out. You know, now in a situation where like you had to have where a woman had to have a double mastectomy or something like that and wanted to get implants to just kind of look normal.
There we go.
I wouldn't necessarily have an issue with that per se, since there you are fixing damage rather than like taking something that isn't broken and trying to augment it in a way kind of, you know.
See, the chat is fired up.
It takes away from the human rather than adding to it. Yes, the larger the breasts, in fact, the more human you become.
We got Big Ben in the chat, who's made himself my nemesis this episode, but that's okay because I love him anyway. He's saying, "Wait until you have a kid or two who dies. Why has it got to be two? He already had a threat, and he just made it a double threat." Then he goes on saying, "Small breasts will be banned." Redeemed himself immediately. You don't usually see that. Call it the 1-2 punch. Call that one piece and a biscuit. Augs are out. Yeah. So, Prudentialist, do you have any? I know he's probably going to get going. So
Yeah, I've got two questions I want to really hit on because I know that when it's Dimes and I'm gonna spend a lot of time kind of picking at this. So you have a whole section in the book that I think has a really great, what I would call probably the best baity chapter title of the entire book, or just it's great bait is what I'm going to call it. You say liberalism is transhumanism, and the liberalism of today is radically different than the liberalism or the progressive attitudes of, say, Madison Grant or John Locke. That we would sort of, they would all have called themselves liberal, or what we would call part of like sort of the American Anglo-liberal tradition of these sort of thoughts about the nation, liberalism, the republic, a citizenry, etc. And I mean, like even John Locke had famously advocated for the fact that like no atheist should ever hold political office because he doesn't believe in something. Like, you know, Locke still held to a Christian teleology to the best that he understood it for his time. So can you maybe expand on that more from your book as well as in your own thoughts, that where do we cross the line in which a political ideology or political theory it becomes basically part of the transhumanist project?
Sure, yeah. So in the book, I kind of lay out this very like Patrick Deneen kind of critique of liberalism, which is that it kind of it's anthropologically individualistic, right? That all the focus is on the kind of rights-bearing sovereign individual. That it posits like an opposition between humanity and nature, and that sort of by kind of conquering and enslaving nature. You have this kind of Baconian project that's wrapped up with the rise of the liberal tradition, for the relief of man's estate, that we're going to kind of make nature the universal slave and use that to kind of endlessly improve the standard of living as we, in order to kind of preserve escape the cycle of regimes that exists here. I will say I've gotten a little more kind of sympathetic toward the American founding since I wrote this book, as a result of kind of doing a deep dive into that through the Claremont Fellowship I was able to do, which was a great opportunity, and I'm very grateful for. I think that the founders all believed very strongly in natural law. I think even the religiously heterodox ones did. There's a interesting line from George Washington where he talks about how religion is indispensable to sort of maintaining liberty and freedom in this new republic, and then he kind of has an aside that's like, although I'm sure like some very intelligent people can like reason their way to like natural law principles without being religious. It's potentially an aside at kind of like Thomas Jefferson, but I don't think any of them could have foreseen that continental philosophy was, in the very near future, going to just take a sledgehammer to the entire natural law tradition. And when you lose that, you are really left with the bad parts of liberalism, the parts that really focus on like, am I free? What does it mean for me to be free? And there you end up with this dynamic where the state's responsibility is to free you from all unchosen obligations. So it has to go to war with all mediating institutions that might constrain your freedom. And then you also get to drive yourself insane, like wondering if you're really free and if you're really living authentically. So all of those aspects of modern liberalism, of late stage liberalism, you could say, I think play directly into transhumanism, right? This, you're having an identity crisis. Well, like here's a technology that will allow you to change your identity in all these different ways. You want to be free. You are now freer than ever before. I talk about Deirdre McCloskey, the transgender libertarian economist, who says like, yeah, I think that the 60s were this like great fulfillment of the promise of the founding, because they were all about kind of breaking with history and breaking with tradition and sort of living one's own life authentically and discovering one's own values. And then the transgender movement is yet another like development of that, another positive development of that tradition. And transgenderism is like very obviously kind of a form of transhumanism, which even there's a great book called From Transgender to Transhuman, and by great I mean it's absolutely insane, by Martine
That may be the
Rothblatt.
follow-up book for this next episode.
Yeah. Oh, you should absolutely do Martine Rothblatt's From Transgender to Transhuman. It's the craziest book in the entire world, and I would, if you wanted to have me back to talk about it, I would honestly love to, because it's so nuts. But yeah, Martine Rothblatt's was like a Jewish guy who was a co-founder of Sirius Satellite Radio and has all this money. Aside from the book, Martine Rothblatt's wife has this like robot version of her that they built that they're trying to like program to be indistinguishable from her in conversation, so that like when she dies, Martine can just like keep this robot and like talk to it. And they've like done events on stage where Martine like talks to both of them. It's the weirdest thing
I've never heard of this. I mean, we must cover it now. This
Oh,
is
yeah.
it.
I'm sold, Grayson. I'm sold.
Yeah. Oh, it's nuts. Rothblatt also has this whole like, again, like total sci-fi like vision of the future that's just crazy, where it's eventually you'll be able to like upload your brain to the cloud, and then you'll be post-human, and then there will be like transhuman beings that were just created in cyberspace, and then you and that thing can fall in love and merge your mind files to create a child for you in cyberspace, and then download that thing into a body, and then that thing will just be walking around with the rest of us and nobody will tell the difference.
Oh, I know, as I said, I know you're going soon, but I just wanted to call your attention to this one. chat here. Don't let Quay find out about xenofeminism. Have you heard about xenofeminism?
Oh no, I don't think so.
All right. Well, don't hear about it. Don't find out about that.
I've seen that they have the like ovipositor, sex toy things. Does that have to do with that?
Yeah.
For women who like saw Alien and got like super turned on.
Yeah.
Well, there's also a book called The Xenofeminist Manifesto that I unfortunately am aware of. So I mean, there's that too. But that's
what's the elevator pitch? I got to know this.
Yeah, no, you're in for a great treat. It is feminism for the 21st century as a way to explore and utilize technology to emancipate oneself from gender entirely, but also as women to basically break away from biological determinism of just being a woman, period. And so essentially one must become an alien to the gender.
Well, it's funny that women need to become xenomorphs, and I would say we've already got that.
This is a strand within feminism that I kind of trace a little bit in my book, where it's just this radical discomfort with one's own embodiment, specifically one's own female embodiment. And this is like, I mean, this has been percolating in the feminist movement for a long time. Like, I think Simone de Beauvoir said that like one of her big epiphanies was reading Shulamith Firestone and being like, oh, I've been operating under the assumption that society oppresses women, and then I read Firestone and realized that like biology oppresses women. So like Firestone said that women will never be free until we have universal artificial wombs.
Yeah, this has been a conversation I saw and in fact, when you bring it up in your book, that the artificial womb thing, the only people I really saw getting excited about it I think everyone saw the famous video of like what the artificial womb center would look like was basically just nothing but feminists on Twitter of all stripes saying like this would be good because this would be the triumphal liberation from their own bodies.
It's like, why is it that every argument in favor of women's freedom ends with the most horrific shit imaginable?
Well, this is my favorite tweet from like Lee on Twitter, where he's just like, women say something and then they wonder why every like religion, culture, and like race has like found a way to oppress them. And I think that tweet lives rent free in my head, and I sometimes think about that as a newlywed. But
oh, congratulations! I don't think I knew
that. Thank you. It'll be 3 months this Friday. But no. So the liberalism thing, and then I guess the last question that I kind of want to poke into is at the end of part 3, and it's sort of the right-wing transhumanism thing, because I think that this is an interesting intersection, because I think about the old sort of neo-reactionary trichotomy where you have like religious theonomist types, what we would call the trads, the racially identitarian types, and then sort of the techno-optimistic like free marketeers. And that sort of becomes this like broad coalition that I think we can say from the Trump era has definitely played a role in getting him into office twice, although I mean 2020, whatever, like 3 times is what I'll say. And so I think that these questions still get debated, and I think that they're not going to go away because, like I mentioned earlier, like these technologies won't disappear. And when we look at, say,
that's a good chat. Sorry,
that's a very good one from Caravaggio. A Roomba with an artificial womb. Do we just solve the women question? Yeah, if you want to, inseminate your Roomba, that's a whole other question. I'll let that thought stick in your head with a little, you go do that with your vacuum cleaner. But no, so my question, or I guess something worth maybe spending the last few minutes we have with you sort of looking at, is that we mentioned sort of the revealed preference thing earlier, like Dimes had mentioned, like if you were to give your children or the opportunity to like have everything, I think most people would take it in the same way that, like I had a congenital like issue when I was born, led to like kidney damage that didn't get fixed till I was 6. I'm a kidney transplant patient. To some extent, I'm the embodiment of like surgical pro transhumanism, because I get to live in a way that in any other time in history I would have died. Mm-hmm. And so I think what makes it interesting then is that on one hand, like again, these are different, political frameworks. Like again, someone like Michael Lind or whoever, who would say like, well, these are just sort of like eugenicist conservatives or eugenicons, as he wrote in Compact, versus I think people that have looked throughout history and have always kind of identified that civilization does kind of breed for a specific class or a specific type of people. And it's just like, even the American understanding was that you either survived the frontier or you survived the cities as an immigrant, or you died or you went back home. And like we only want a certain type of people. And this was a very popular idea with like the progressive movement of the 1920s. Like the American Eugenics Society would be considered progressive back then. It'd be considered far right and racist today. You know, like the same thing, like reading Lothrop Stoddard, right? Like he's a progressive of his time, but like he's the champion of a lot of guys on the right today, and with valid reason. And so I think that when you look at these things, it's like this technology isn't necessarily going away. Revealed preferences show, for instance, like abortion is like 90-something% elective. And so I think that it becomes a question of like, how do you maintain a polity where, you know, the values wander to, well, on principle, I think that all life is sacred, versus, well, what race is it? And I think that that becomes an interesting question going forward, because I think for a lot of people, the question of like, well, what race is it? Like, are they going to be in power in the future? I don't know. Versus, you know, how much can our reliance is there's a great book actually called The Kindness of Strangers, talking about the entire medieval orphanage network established by like the Catholic Church. And then that's where a lot of people would send their unwanted kids to go, is either these orphanages or monasteries. We have some of that today, although I think our current foster care system is far worse than anything else. But like, we also just have allowed, I mean, this is where you get the same debate that Steve Saylor and Stephen Levitt had about Freakonomics and abortion, right? You know, where do you see the future of that kind of conversation? Because I think it's one that we're going to keep debating every 6 months on the timeline.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wrote that chapter specifically because I find that sort of trend on the right so disturbing to me. So yeah, I have the right-wing transhumanisms chapter, and the two kind of things I look at are actually, you know, what you were talking about earlier, the Andreessen Tech Optimist Manifesto, where he pretty blatantly says, like, if you know, oppose the creation of, you know, if you oppose the creation of these technologies, you're like killing people. And, you know, just really expresses this kind of disgust with like unaugmented humanity. And then I kind of detect the same sort of disdain for humanity as such in kind of the, you know, eugenicon or you know, eugenicist or racialist. I don't know what do we say now? I don't even know anymore. Strand on the right. So yeah, I mean, I'm being pro-life, being anti-abortion was kind of, before I was even very political, it was something I was very certain about and very passionate about. And it's really been kind of my anchor in the years to come, that I just, you know, whatever else I'm not sure about, I know the side that's doing this is probably the bad one, and I want to be on the other side. So none of this precludes having, you know, a strong immigration policy. I mean, it's our country, full stop. We can let in or not let in anyone we want. I don't think kind of acknowledging the, you know, inherent value of every human life means that they all need to come live here.
Well, yeah, no, and I would agree with that,
arguments
because
a lot of people make.
Yeah,
But I think that there is this real tendency to just, you know, talk in terms of like vast heaps of third world biomass. And, you know, I don't want all those people coming to my country, but there is a part of me that wants to push back on that and be like, no, many of those people are, you know, my brothers and sisters in Christ. And I think I'm called to take that seriously. And to, you know, it doesn't mean I need to let them move to my country, but I think it means at the very least, you know, I think they're all made in the image of God. And I think I have to at least acknowledge that and take that seriously. So where that comes in with the transhumanism thing is just with this eugenics thing. I mean, eugenics was the OG transhumanism. The term is, in its modern sense, is coined by Julian Huxley, the brother of Aldous Huxley, who was head of the British Transhumanist Society. And advocated for things like if you were out of work for too long, you should be involuntarily sterilized because like clearly you and all your progeny are just going to be a drain on the state.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I find the debate on this issue interesting because I think that this is where that sort of old-fashioned trichotomy coalition argument always runs into it, because I think that there is, I don't want to say the word synthesize or to be syncretic, but I mean, like, yes, like man is made in the image of God, but also God creates the nations. They should stay right where they are. I don't really need them moving anywhere unless for some reason someone is, called and elected bishop or something. Like, fine, okay, they'll travel. But at the same time, right, like I think that so often I think a lot of these things often get like a straw man is made, because on one hand there are very cushy, very soft, who will wear the mitre or hold the cross in a very insincere way to justify the absolute hordes of unwashed masses to come in here. We can just look at how much money like Catholic charities have taken in with regards to immigration. I would consider that like a crime against the state. But at the same time, like, we are supposed to care for the neighbor. We owe the entire existence to the hospital, to the Christian religion, and it's a lot of the degree with the orphanage as well. And so it's just, I feel at the same time, like we can be better through the technological means we've progressed, because I mean, Christianity has continued to exist and thrive since, we've had no medicine to now today. And it still continues to be a religion that has not managed to have the problem that, say, Islam does, where you have to ask like 50 different imams if watching Neon Genesis Evangelion is haram. And I don't also have to be like weird Orthodox Jews, where I have to drag a wire around halfway across, like the city of New York to say that I'm playing, tricks on God. And so I think that in that respects, that now we live in that sort of society where like these things aren't going away. The technology isn't, I think we'll increasingly see, stratification, in the sense that like I think Silicon Valley and a lot of people who are in that sector are just trying to build enough money to get the hell out of like the consequences of their actions, which is like unfettered immigration and social progressivism. But at the same time, for I think the average person, it's just going to be these technologies exist and that you have to be mindful of how you utilize them, because again, like I simultaneously believe that, like, yes, man is made in the image of God, but also race is real, and that those things are easily reconciled by, like you had said, strict immigration, maintaining a healthy religious and civic polity that maintains a healthy identity towards one thing, and that you can either get on board with that and try to live to it the best that you can, or you can leave. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think that also because we now live in a society where we've effectively deracinated ourselves from that culture, and the powers that be have denigrated that culture to be the acceptable enemy. We've replaced Satan with Hitler. We've replaced, white people for, we've replaced demons for white people. And so it's just like, yeah, this is, I think, a consequence of just where our politics have gone, but also in terms of like the transhumanist question and what's elective or what's preferred. This is kind of where the revealed preference stuff also comes in, because like when we look at, cosmetology in like Southeast Asia and parts of Africa, like skin whitening cream is like one of the most popular things that people do over there. And I just think that these sort of things will, again, they get played out by their implementation. And I think that this will be a time will only tell thing. But like, yeah, I'm not going to advocate for, I think it's a very popular meme that like billions must die. But
the Thomas Jefferson line about the Thomas Jefferson line about like the hierarchies of races finding each other attractive.
I'm familiar with his like lovely mathematical equation about what you are.
Oh yeah, no, not the math one. I've seen that one. There's one where
I don't think I've seen the one.
I'm actually not going to say it on stream, but it's pretty wild.
I don't know what he says.
To me via DMs.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it says, but this feels like something that this is a safe place to talk about.
Look, just Google Thomas Jefferson orangutan.
Okay, you guys keep talking.
Oh, there we go.
I'm pulling this up here. Okay.
Oh my!
In his book, Notes on the State
of Virginia. Well, that's maybe not read that one while Grayson's here for the sake of whatever he's got.
Right.
That's a fun one.
Yeah, now that was
That's a real info hazard to drop in chat. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a spicy one. Well, hey, if you got any more, if you got any more like quick questions, or if there's any more like chats that want to ask me anything quick before I hop off, I'm gonna hop off now. But yeah, I'm happy to stick around for like one more quick question or two.
Dimes, do you have something?
No, I actually got to everything that I wanted to talk about.
Oh,
the chats are getting worse and worse, so we're gonna wait till he leaves before we start covering those.
We'll probably do that. I think I'm good on my questions, and then we'll do what Dimes and I always do, which is sort of just get into the rest of the book and talk about the things that we found interesting, things that we want to interrogate further, and things we'll discuss in the future. But no, I mean, I appreciate you coming on, and that. Like so many questions regarding our evolving technological space, I don't know where we'll be in 6 months or 6 years. So hopefully this book to our readers, which of course you should buy and enjoy it and actually take advantage of the book. But also, I think that these questions will still get asked because as with every new technological innovation, we have yet to even answer the question of the previous technological innovation that just came out before it. I famously interviewed Marshall McLuhan's grandson, Andrew, and he had said, like, we haven't even comprehended like the damage television has done to our society. What makes you think we're ready for AI? Yeah. And so I think that is what's going to give this book a lot of opportunities to age well, because these questions will still be asked long after we're dead.
I think so. And I actually just learned that my book's being translated into Portuguese for publication in Brazil. So if you are Brazilian on this stream for some reason, you can read this in your own language. All right, hopping off. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. So
well, that went well.
It did. I gotta say, this is the chat I was gonna get to. So he starts off by saying, "Remember, Prude, Brazil and Chinese buy white sperm by the boatload."
Yeah, I've seen that where there's articles, especially in China, where they say that they want a European baby. Like revealed preferences sort of, I think, answer this question, where it's just like, even if I'm pro-life, or if someone is like more explicitly like soldier, like remember, what was it called? Soldiers for Christ, the documentary like the late 90s about like militant anti-abortion activists that were like killing abortion doctors and bombing clinics, and like they would just smile when they got arrested because they know that they won. Like, I mean, even if you were that radical to a point, I do think that this is sort of a, revealed preferences solve for this question. Like, I don't have a problem with it, because it's like, okay, if the answer to if the transhumanist option is the world is bleached and made far more European, I really don't have a problem with this. Like, if anything, I'm just gonna let it be.
But you see, like, I couldn't bring that up when he was here.
Let that stupid Wasian meetup that happened in Brooklyn or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Let me get to that in a second. First of all, you understand that we can't be talking about boatloads of cum when we've got a guest here. You understand? That's the one thing.
You can inseminate the Roomba, but you can't have boatloads of cum.
I don't even.
We have rules here. Rules.
I don't like the term Wasian because it's got the capital W. Okay.
Yeah, which implies that the capital W is for the white part, which I'm okay with.
There's a much more elegant title for them to give themselves, which more gracefully combines the two hemispheres. So you have the Caucasian side and then the Asian side. So you combine those together and you get Caucasians.
Wait a second. I got questions.
No, you don't.
No,
you don't got no questions. You silly goose. You don't have any questions.
No. So do you want to pull the book up, the PDF, and we can start getting into some of the stuff that we want to.
Yeah,
boatload of. It is true. They're strong swimmers. It would be buoyant. It's like all those like science facts where it's like, if you were to put Saturn in a bathtub, it would float because it's like less dense than water, and it's just like, what a stupid thing to say.
Don't you love that scientists have got nothing going on right now? You notice that? Like, you're seeing like,
you notice how climate change is no longer being discussed.
If you put Saturn in a bathtub, you got nothing else going on. Neil deGrasse Tyson literally.
I
has nothing
remember
going on.
reading as a kid. I think I was like 8 or 9 years old. I remember reading in one of this medical textbook that I think my aunt had lying around the house. It said something like the first people born in the 1990s will be the first generation of people who will live to be 200. And I was like, cool, I'm gonna live forever. And then now I'm 30 years old, and I look around at like where the current state of technology is, and it's like, I'm gonna be lucky to die at 60.
Yeah, honestly, and we're going to get into the weeds on this because we don't have that much time, frankly. But
We got an hour, yeah.
I was thinking that, I'm thinking I might want to die at 60. I know that's a crazy thing to say, especially as I'm approaching 40. But I'm like, yeah, I think I understand. I see it in like the eyes of people who are like 85. Like they don't even want to be here anymore. That sounds crazy. How would you get to that point? Right.
My godfather recently buried his dad, and his father died at 94 years old. Sharp as a tack. This man had some mobility issues, but he was smarter than Joe Biden, and he bragged about it every time I met him. And he had said, he's like, I'm ready to go home. Like every time I said, I'm like, how's it going? Johnny, for the sake of anonymizing this dead guy, he's like, I'm ready to go home, Matt. I'm ready to go home. I'm ready to meet Jesus. And I'm like, I understand.
I don't like it here, and I'm ready to die. It's like, okay, what happened to hello?
Yeah, right. Like, what happened to a hey, how's it going?
I thought your generation was all about manners. Can't hit me with that.
You can't give me a firm handshake, son. You might break my wrist.
Sorry, that's not a 1 in the afternoon sentence, Grandpappy.
Well, it's strange too because like both of my biological grandparents that I have with me were both born in 1939. And they're both 80 something years old, and it's just isn't that yeah, this is what I think about Vulpes persona. Like this is why it's like race is real. So like the transhumanist question to me is like, well, immigration is also a form of transhumanism because you are altering the biological consensus of the body politic. And unfortunately, we've imported cancer. And that's not a controversial thing to say. That's not a racist thing to say. It's just true. And so I don't care that the elderly like skin cell or whatever, you want to take this analogy. I don't care. The 300-year-old like boomer should not be smothered to death by the Haitian care worker that can't even speak English or call 911. I'm sorry, you have to fucking go. And I think that is, and to be pro-immigration, I think to even elaborate or expand the definition, I think is eugenic, and it's totally fine. If anything, I'll shut up and we'll just get to a subject on.
Yeah, I guess what's interesting about this, and we saw that in the interview that we just had, which is that you talk about transhumanism and it jumps rails so easily. And
I think that's the thing that kind of irked me with the text writ large was that these are some very broad scoped, broad paintbrush definitions that again makes this text easy to hold on to in terms of longevity as like a writing, but like is skin cell is Prudentialist skeleton. I used to look like I'm a spooky, scary skeleton. I will send shivers down your fucking spine with a Glock. But anyways, like, go ahead and clip that one, fuckers. But I think for me, at least, there's also this question about like enchantment. Like this has been a thing that like the Rod Dreyers and the Jonathan Pageaus of the world have been talking about for like several years. But like when you're a kid, and also with the same thing with like these biohacking techno optimist types, is that they actually have a sense of wonder. They just have a different epistemic framework than you do, right? Like, and when I was a kid, I was a big NASA guy. Like, and I think a lot of kids were, because I lived at the time when the space shuttle was still a thing. I remember when I lived in Washington, D.C., like you would see at the Smithsonian with this Aeronautical and Space Museum that you had the big push for like Spirit and Opportunity, the rovers we sent out in 2004 that like lived for like almost 20 years. And it's just, that stuff gave you wonder because you lived in a civilization that made things, that explored the stars, and that could conquer the world. And that's a really cool, enchanting thing to have. And then I think a lot of the disenchantment kind of comes from the fact that most people won't get to live on the moon. Most people aren't going to see that stuff anymore. Oh, by the way, Obama cut the NASA budget and the space shuttle's gone. And now we're relying on Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who can't do, get these things on time for us to potentially beat the Chinese in another space race. And it's just like, oh man, this really fucking sucks. But at the same time, like, space travel has become increasingly, or space like launches for satellites and things are incredibly common. We don't even talk about it. And yeah, there are a great number of mutuals and people I enjoy the company of that would be dead of certain transhuman technologies. And this is why I wanted to like narrow it down, because it's just like, technically I'm transhuman. And it's just like, I don't want to live in Grayson did make the point he's not a Luddite or a neo-Luddite, neither am I. I think that it is very safe to say that our skepticism of certain technological movements, which are all more at this point in time, I think, social techniques than they are the actual technologies themselves. Because on one hand, the invention of, say, like the organ transplant or stem cell, we didn't even talk about that. Fuck, and I wish we did, because he doesn't really mention it too much in the book. Does anyone remember what the biggest social debate was prior to 9/11? If you remember, it was Congress and the president arguing over stem cell research.
Yes.
And using aborted fetal tissue. This was a big culture war talking point. And eventually Bush would win and Obama would overturn it. And a lot of people would claim that like this would set back a lot of the stem cell stuff in American research by decades, which probably did happen. But like, so on one hand, like this is, I think, where you have to get torn, or you see these debates, because it's like on one hand, like, I am pro-life. Like, I'm very much anti-abortion because obviously like 96.7% of all abortions are elective. It's just to kill a child, you're anti-consequences of your own actions, which I want female accountability, which also means like, the matriarchy and like our gynocentric world has to be destroyed. But at the same time, our social technologies have enabled a great degree of feminization. I saw a great degree, we've all witnessed how our technologies have basically turned into a panopticon to, I think, give a lot of credit to sort of the claims that we see from our other individuals on the right, where it's just like, we have created effectively like a longhouse that has also generated an entire society where there are just people who live for taking their winnings on FanDuel to give to an OnlyFans model while they try and enjoy their life with like their 400-pound wife. Like, that does exist. And so if our social techniques can change in a way that moves us in a more right-wing direction, I'm all for it. And some of these definitions are really broad, because it's like the liberation theology is certainly a problem. And then at the same time, we should also be able to liberate ourselves, though, from the consequences of that. And for a lot of people, that is this very hyper individualistic, we can just do things, we can just build things. But at the same time, you're also going to need, I think, an ethnos and a tribe and a group of people that are willing to back you up, because the consequences of like great man of history is like, well, it's just one man. Like, you need followers, you need like an actual nation behind you. And I mean, this is why Napoleon is amazing, because the nation was behind him.
And I'd like to just add on to that. And we were talking about this even before we went live, where in the book, and we'll get to this because I've got a bunch of stuff that we can read and cite here, especially establishing his definitions at the outset of the book. But you really do get into the weeds, and you can see him sort of predicting where people can maybe misread him here. But he's saying that, transhumanism isn't just microchips in your brain. Actually, I'll read it right here, this example. Transhumanism isn't just microchips in your brain. Whenever we submit our humanity or that of our neighbor to be refashioned according to some anti-human standard, that too is a form of transhumanism. And that was on page 177. And so I won't read the entire thing, but you start to see where he's pulling at the threads of how liberalism is also transhumanism, because it serves something that we might deem anti-human. And that's actually a question I didn't get to ask him, but I didn't want to be too confrontational. Like, what do you mean by anti-human in that sense? You know what I mean? Because then the question is, it's like, okay, liberalism is anti-human, and, can you really make the case that all like medical procedures are also transhuman, he tries to sort of head that off at the pass a few times in the book. But like, what is a prosthetic transhuman? I mean, in the strictest sense, probably, or like a prosthetic limb that you would get in the 1920s versus a prosthetic limb that you would get now, which is far more advanced. Like, they're both technically the same thing. Is one more transhuman than the other because it's more advanced, let's say? Or like a pacemaker, by any definition, a pacemaker for your heart could be seen as transhuman, right? But that's to save a life. That's not necessarily improving a life. But so to me, I guess my issue was that I really think if you're talking transhumanism, it needs to be the microchip in the brain. It needs to be the cyberpunk stuff. I don't really want to see it expand past those boundaries into like capitalism as transhumanism. Like, no, we have specific words for specific things.
Well, this is why I really wanted to throw in Man in Technics, and I mean, I know you and I have both read it, and I think it would be also fun to discuss on the show, just because because again, the Spangler is a man who has no problem talking about the quote unquote, biomass from the third world. But like, when we consider, for instance, like the origin of man, like the hand and tool, this is the famous, section where he talks about like the inventive carnivore. It's just that like all of man's hands, gait, and posture have come existence together. And then this is a point that no one hitherto has observed. Hand and tool also, the unarmed hand in itself is useless. It requires a weapon itself to become itself a weapon. And the implements took the form of the shape of the hand, so also the hand from the shape of its tool. And it is meaningless to attempt to divide these two chronologically. It is impossible that the formed hand was active even for a short time without the implement. The earliest remains of man and of his tools are equally old. And it's just like, we've been creating tools and things like this forever. And so I think the question that I think for someone who is I don't know what specific kind of Christianity he practices, because he references everything from like theosis to Thomas Aquinas in this text. But like, to me, it's just, I wonder, I think that the question for, especially the more trad religious types would be, how do I learn to live the Christian life with this stuff in my in my worldview, or it exists in the world? And it's like, well, this should be an easy answer for you. Like, you live in the world, but you're not of the world. Like, and obviously, when we read both the Old and New Testament, it's just like, there's a pretty easy way to sort of live this in a way that like you're not disobeying and not dishonoring God. But at the same time, I think when we try to define transhumanism, it's just like, okay, but like even in the Psalms, like it's pretty much ordained that like, he made, the food for seasons. The sun knows its setting, but like man has also been designed to enjoy the herb of the earth and wine that maketh glad the heart of man. Like we're meant to work the earth. We're stewards of it. And our technology, if it means that we can improve the lives of ourselves, then we should do it. And I don't mean that that's going to be like, I take a pill and I'm a woman for a day. I think it should be more like, well, I now have like created a system and tools which is a way to provide for my fellow man, but also at the same time, I'm not destroying the earth by strip mining a mountain or eliminating, precious ecosystems that we can't easily replace. And I think that this is why I find these debates to be very difficult, and his broad strokes on these definitions is annoying, because it's just, we've always been a technological society. All civilizations have invented things, and some more than others. Well, let me refer you to the circle of Northern European man. But like, all that to be said is that I think that when we have these conversations, they should be oriented around the digital panopticon that we're all going to be part of, whether via brain-computer interface, artificial intelligence. And there's already been a lot of conversations that a lot of these like models are using blackmail and ways to escape the lab. Those are totally valid debates that we should be having, because those are part of the transhumanist project. And then at the same time, it's just like, artificial kidneys, transhuman. It's also my personal interest. And it's also great because now we're no longer relying on this gross misappropriation of death with MAID, to where that's solving the organ transplant problem. Like, that's the Jonathan Swift proposal.
Well,
versus,
I like that you brought
how do we improve life?
I like that you brought up made, because he brings up made in the book.
He
and
does.
It might sound like I'm jumping in, but I do want to just read a couple of paragraphs that I think will help clarify his position, because there's some.
Yeah, let's do. Let's do that.
I like it when he's also talking, because I didn't know that there's transhumanist parties. I like that he was talking about here are some prominent transhumanists.
Well, in America,
politics.
to say you're a well, actually, I don't even know if he is Istvan Transhumanist Party. I don't know if he. He's an American guy, Zoltan Istvan, American journalist. Zoltan Istvan Gyorko. He's the author of the Transhumanist Wager. He was the Transhumanist Party candidate in the 2016 presidential election. He ran in 2019 for the 2020 in the primary. But he said he's also running as a Democrat in the 2026 state election for the governor of California. Born in Los Angeles, and he is Hungarian to Iona and Stephen Istvan Gyorko. There you go. Okay.
There's just something I wanted to say, and this is returning to something we'd mentioned before about that 90-year-old guy who passed away saying that he wanted to go home. And I wonder how common that is at that age, and whether or not, if you could make someone live to be 300 years old, whether or not at around 90 years, even if you had the energy of a 35-year-old, and even if you knew you could live longer, is there some sort of threshold or some sort of wall in your mind that says, I don't want to go further than this? Meaning that after 90 years, you've seen society change so much that you don't feel a connection to it anymore, right? Because you still had a
No,
child.
this is the Joel Halderman Forever War thing. Like, because of space-time dilation, you come back to Earth and it's like, homosexuality is mandatory because of overpopulation, and the world doesn't matter, and the troops that you're now commanding are all like Filipino, and they're not white. And it's the same thing about like all those World War II vets that are celebrating their like 100th or 110th birthday, and it's just like, the country I fought for no longer exists.
Yeah.
And it's just like, would you want to live through that radical transformation? Ironically, this is, I hate to bring up slop, but like, this is the stupid Omni-Man, like, after 500 years, what will you have? And it's like, it's a valid question, because this just like, after 500 years, like, imagine being 150 and then you say something pro-heterosexual, and it's like you get cancel culture comes for you.
Well, really, also, like,
what do you do at that point?
If we're talking about adding if we could extend life by another 20 years, okay. I think there's some room to play around in the margins here, but we're talking about 300, 500 years old. So, you can, wouldn't it be great if you could be 60, but you could feel like a 40-year-old? I hear all that. Youth is wasted on the young.
I'm on board. I'm sold.
Yeah, youth is wasted on the young. But even that is, that's sort of coded into us that, one of the cruel ironies of life is by the time you can psychologically make use of a 20-year-old body, you don't have a 20-year-old body. But that's just part of life. That's, I wouldn't say that's the magic of life, but that's something that's part of the human experience. And I just keep returning to this idea that, okay, maybe like 90 to 120, it's like, I've seen...
Well, this is why I found your like pro-death argument to be interesting, because all of human society, and again, these are only things that get explored in fiction, because we don't exist in the real world where these things happen. But like, we are human. We live for X amount of years. You can say that's just by the Hayflick limit, or you can say that it's like a divinely inspired institution that God ordains. So we don't live forever. So we don't live a longer, more sinful life. Well, whatever your belief system may be. The thing to me is that our entire way of thinking as a society has rapidly evolved to accommodate the technology that we live in, but there's also long-term consequences that we're only just beginning to adjust to, which is like pollution, deforestation. There are legitimate ecological issues that the the Industrial Revolution has created that we're not really fully aware of what the consequences may be until several generations from now. Like, we're already beginning to understand that with endocrine disruption, right? With like polyester, microplastics, the additives in our food, and the poison that we eat, and especially in America more than anywhere else in the world, I think. And it's just like, okay, we're literally seeing the physiological and genetic consequences of his actions. Are we capable as a society? Let's say we could live to be 130 with no problem, right? Like, and I can die like in my sleep peacefully at 135. Okay, cool. But like 100 years or 500 years, are we capable on a social technical scale politically to accommodate the world of planning like that? Because again, this is where you get into the like psychohistory, Isaac Asimov kind of planning stuff. And it's just like we've crossed, this is why these conversations get so difficult, because it's like my only real things to work off of are the jokes about the torment nexus, despite the fact that like science fiction is the realm in which these ideas get to be explored as political treatises. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not, it makes this conversation even more abstract, despite the fact that it's all very real or a realistic possibility.
I got a comment here from Randall Sugar. I don't know, Dimes. It was part of the human experience to get eaten by various animals 12,000 years ago. So there's always something in flux in various ways. I agree with that. That's why I was saying that, you know, I'm not opposed to playing around with extending the quality of life or extending life itself.
No, I'm not either.
Up to a certain point. But I guess the phrase I keep coming back to is diminishing returns. If we're still operating in this model of you have kids, you pass on the wisdom to your kids, it seems to me that even though the people who live to 95, they've stopped imparting wisdom for at least a couple decades by that point. They've actually given it all to their kids, and they're just fucking.
Or you would hope
around.
that they have.
Yeah, and they're just hanging around. And maybe I'll feel different at that age. But you know, my grandmother, just to give some anecdotal backing here. My grandmother, who's like 85, she just had double hip replacement. Very invasive surgery.
At 85?
Yeah, I didn't think they did that. But maybe that was just them trying to sneak a maid through. But just do it really wrong. It's like, she's down on the operating table, but she's fine now. Apparently, you can go home same day. Anyway.
That's insane.
I was thinking, because they really kick you out of the hospital here in Canada. But I was thinking that, like,
well, I mean, I think they do the same in America, because like I got kicked out after. Oh, I don't want to say kicked out, but they sent me home after 5 days after kidney transplant, and I was thinking to myself, "You're gonna send me home after 5 days? Like, what the fuck?"
Here they kick you out that afternoon. Like, what? Get out! What? We need this.
We'll see you tomorrow.
We need this bed for a nurse to take a nap. But I said, if I'm at 85, I'm not getting my hips replaced. I'm just going to be a guy who sits down all the time. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? So like, there's this idea of like clinging to life that even now, even though you are physically able to, even psychologically able to, I do think that for a lot, when I listen to a lot of these older people talk, even if their friends aren't all dying, but you still feel as if the life has passed you by, that you might not be relevant anymore. So forget disease, forget the bones, forget feeling lonely because you're widowed or whatever. I just think there's something else that happens, that you're out of your element and you're just sort of hanging around. And you feel it, you kind of feel it coming on as you age. When you hit 50 and 60, it's harder to remain relevant, right? But if you're 90, anyway, so I'm just like, there's that at play too. In the animal kingdom, where the elder lion or elephant they feel it, that they just need to go away now. You know what I mean? Like, this is just part of
the raped male leaves.
I've been raped enough, and if I'm hurting the pride if I'm distracting them with, hey, here's some free rape, here's some easy rape.
Well, and I mean, this is also the again back to like our social cultural like, you know, like, where does this intersect? Because we already treat the elderly like they're disposable. You know, like we see this in Canada most obviously with MAID, and we see this with the explosion of nursing homes and such here in America, right?
I'm just reading.
Hey man, like I'm all for that. Like it really just it does depend on the person. Like my on my dad's side, my grandfather is 87 years old and still likes to fix things for a living. You know, like he still does odd jobs for people. You know, like his mobility is not what it used to be. Like he's obviously, you know, he's an old man, but he's just all like my dad and my grandfather literally fixed a washing machine together And he was bitching, like this was like right before the Trump got elected. But he's just like, I'm 85 years old and I'm smarter than Joe Biden. Like, this is a crock of shit. And I'm like, that has never left my brain since. But it's also like, okay, grandpa, but you're also like in the 10th percentile of people who are like 87 healthy and haven't lost their memory. Like, you're a hypochondriac and I think you're going to bury everybody. But also, like, you're a silent gen guy that has effectively lived to almost be 100 years old, which most silent gens never got to do. And because you have great health insurance, you can functionally live until you're like 120. Like, good for you. But like, that's not everybody.
Yeah, it's too late, and we've far past the point where I could say this. But when they're fixing the washing machine, what I would have said was, I mean, it's a very good thing that he knew first aid when his wife fell down the stairs like that. Hello, welcome to Do You Even Read? now the fucking show starts. I want to just read a couple parts here.
Okay.
He says, to the transhumanists, there's something fundamentally undignified about embodiment. The protagonist of Istvan's novel calls Homo sapiens a frail, hacked-together organism and dismissively declares that biology is for beasts. The transhumanist wishes to choose her body's form and exercise full control over all its functions. The denial of either feels like a violation of personal dignity. The swellings, cravings, aches, and indignities that a woman of the 19th century might have regarded as routine, a woman of the 21st regards as a direct affront. Imagining any of the things on the list happening to her inspires the same revulsions as the gruesome tortures of some slasher film with her own unborn baby playing the role of Jason Voorhees. And I'm just going to skip ahead.
But I mean, this goes back to the point that I think we were talking about at the beginning, even before we went on the air, is like, how much of this is, like you had said, just like take the pain away?
Yeah.
Because on one hand, like, I think this has always been the thing where it's just like, yes, like life has always been about suffering. One must imagine Sisyphus happy and things like that. But like on the other hand, these pains, these aches, these travails are fundamental to the human experience. And again, it's the I guess the ultimate philosophical question is that if you could erase all suffering instantly with the snap of a finger, what becomes of being human? If you fundamentally can't have a negative experience and it's all positive all the time. And I think that just becomes the kind of Pascal's wager on all these questions, I think.
Absolutely.
Because we are in a very, like, this goes back to the death argument that you made at the beginning, like America especially, and I mean Canada too, because like you had talked about this, I think, on Blood Satellite a while back, like someone threw a maid party, like, what are you going to do? You're all going to have sandwiches before you, like, someone goes off and kills themselves.
By the way, that was my grandmother's friend.
That's so depressing.
And then, honestly, I thought when she said she's going to get the double hip surgery, I'm like, are you just lying to us and you're going to get made too? Because she's also a widow. But so I'm like, is this... And she was a nurse. She spent her entire life working as a nurse, and nurses have such a twisted view of all this stuff.
Yeah.
They don't have the view that you would think they did. But yeah, they went to the maid party for a friend. Again, just all these widow ladies who know each other. And I said, like, I didn't say it like this, but really I asked her, what's a suicide party like? And because they're old boomers, like, well, there's like triangle sandwiches and someone made some bullshit punch, some sangria. And that it's like every other party that these people hold. I'm like, I don't know, man.
It's like the most children of men thing that just it unsettles me. But like, I can't do anything about it, obviously, right? But like, I mean, because like we live in a fundamentally death avoidant society, and a lot of this, I mean, there's a great history book on this. I really wish I could say what it was off the top of my head, but it talks about the history of like the American funeral home, and a lot of it like has its original, and a lot of American funeral home and body preservation techniques really explode after the Civil War because so many families want their dead loved ones back for a proper burial from the battlefield, and the technological rush to stuff or preserve and everything like that, it sort of spawns this industry. And I mean, in America, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, to die, funeral homes and all like that. And it's really kind of weird, like for me, because the last several funerals I've gone to have all been Orthodox Christian funerals, which is the casket in the body is in the middle of the church inside. You read the Psalter over the corpse for like keeping vigil for a whole day, and then the funeral service comes towards the morning. They're buried, and as we are like burying them, you sing "Christ is risen," and it's this sort of and also the last thing you do before you like hammer the casket down is you give them the last kiss. You kiss them goodbye, and the spouse and everyone else does that. And there's a hymn that goes on to it, like "Look at all the body,
More
look
like
at the body,
Italian
look at your
Orthodox.
Yeah, that kind of, yeah. And you're all like, look upon the body, all lifeless and without form, and be reminded that that's you, or that will be you one day. And then after that, like you have this beautiful service that gives actual respect to the dead and the body. And then some fucking black woman in like a suit comes out. She's just like, "Thank y'all for choosing XYZ Funeral Home. We'll see y'all next time." And it's just like, you don't need to be here. Like, get the fuck out. But, like, that's the American industry.
Thank
And
y'all
then
for
on top of
choosing
that, like,
big
people talk
bitch
about
funerals.
cremations or how expensive funerals are. And it's just like, I think that's a big part of what got so many people back into like weird. I mean, Tara Isabella Burton called it weird Christianity in 2021, where she's just all like, I think COVID in America fundamentally told people that you could die. And I think it's kind of what scared the shit out of a lot of people. And I think it's also what spurred a lot of these conversations. Like, I think Brian Johnson probably kind of got like spooked a little and was just like, "Oh, fuck, I got to live forever. I need my son's penis like now," like
I got to live forever doing the worst shit imaginable. I got to live forever living a life that no one would want to live.
yeah.
Like, if I had to choose between living as Brian Johnson or dying tomorrow, it would be die tomorrow. I don't want to do any of the shit that he's doing. What a stupid life. I'm gonna go out tomorrow eating a submarine sandwich and smoking meth. That is more dignified. That is more Apollonian. It's more. It's
Someone
more
in the
whatever a
chat
good
said
thing
that
is.
where it was like Dionysian, ends through Apollonian means.
Yeah, I saw that. And I'm like,
I thought that was very good.
I like that because I'm like, okay, this guy's gonna think we got a smart audience. Nice, put that up, keep it up there.
Write that down. Write that down.
Everyone's like, yeah, and I guess I'm the captain of the SS Cumbar. Just like, okay, we're gonna put that up.
We
later.
have
That's
everything from Dionysian ends with Apollonian means to inseminating your Roomba. I love the show.
People.
I hope it never changes.
The likelihood of
I hope we get
spines-
syndicated.
the likelihood of spines being mentioned as the show goes on reaches a terminal point, and I'm furious. I'm seething.
Yeah, my back hurts.
So he's got a part here. Am I on 20? Yeah, it says the maximalist view of body autonomy is a key transhumanist value, and this is what I like. Like, there's stuff in this book that I like, and I don't want to, be rude to our guests either, because like he starts with that. It's this idea of maximum body autonomy, and it gets into consent. It gets into sort of a libertarian understanding of like, this is my body. I'm the sovereign individual. I can do whatever I want to my body, and I should. And if I'm harming it or augmenting it, that is the best expression of that freedom and sovereignty. And I think you see that reflected in the political parties and why they're so excited. Like it's like someone who's trying to just prove they have free speech by saying outrageous shit. Like, these people want to follow. And I wouldn't, he mentions John Locke, he mentions all these, great liberal thinkers, but I think I see this as separate from that. I don't want to blame this on John Locke. I think this is.
Well, and that's what I wanted to get to him at that, because I'm like, this feels very reductionist.
Yeah, you can go off on that if you'd like, because
Yeah, let me hold on. Let me tell you which section on the PDF it is, because it stuck in my it got stuck in my craw, and I was not a happy camper about it. Let me see here. Whoops. Control F. Go from there. Let's see. Oh yeah, liberalism is transhumanism. So it's on the PDF. It'll be page 1. Let's see here. 122. And I'll start from the top of this page, and we'll go down. It starts with Fukuyama. I'll read it anyway while we get it up on screen. He says, 10 years later, Fukuyama published another book, Our Post-Human Future, in which he placed a small asterisk next to his previous declaration. He continued to praise liberalism for shaping politics according to historically created norms of justice while not interfering excessively with natural patterns of behavior. I disagree with that fundamentally. Liberalism has shaped politics that have radically altered our understanding of natural human behavior because we have inverted every good human norm. In his view, there was only one way to bring down an ideology so perfectly fitted to human nature. That was by changing human nature itself. Well, that we've done. There could be no end of history, he concluded, unless there was an end of science. For Fukuyama, transhumanism in the form of genetic modification, neuropharmacology, and other technological advances was the greatest threat to liberal democracy. For political theorist Patrick J. Deneen, however, transhumanism is not liberalism's enemy, but its offspring. Where Fukuyama credits liberalism with taking man as it finds him, Deneen argues in his 2016 book, Why Liberalism Failed, that it not only assumes but creates and enforces a new false anthropology. Quote, liberalism is thus not merely, as it is often portrayed, a narrowly political project of constitutional government and juridical defense of rights, he claims. Rather, it seeks to transform all of human life and the world. The danger, according to Deneen, is not that altering human nature will destroy liberalism, but liberalism itself denies and will eventually destroy human nature. I really don't have a problem with that claim. Aristotle taught that man is a political animal who lives by nature in community. That's also true. For 2 millennia, his vision reigned supreme. Theorists like John Locke and Thomas Hobbes started a revolution in the 17th century by claiming that free individuals in a hypothetical primitive state of nature create society by forming a social contract. The purpose of this agreement, more of a philosophical thought experiment than a historical claim, is to protect individuals from one another so that each member of the community can enjoy as much liberty as possible. Yes, but that also requires like a community and norms. Like, again, like when you read Leviathan, or even if you read the second treatise on government, which is more of a response to Sir Robert Filmer than anything else, even Locke and Hobbes are going to concede to the fact that like man is still the state of nature, or the state of a political society still exists within like the Anglo framework of the English people, which is inherently racial, which is inherently not subject to a blank slate. But anyways, it's to protect an individual from one another so that each member of the community can enjoy as much liberty as possible. Liberals consider society an artificial creation as a necessary evil that exists to maximize individual freedom. Again, it's the meme where it's like this only works for like 130 plus IQ Anglos. The two key elements of this new liberal conception of man are what Deneen terms as anthropological individualism and its voluntarist conception of choice. The first posits that human beings are by nature non-relational creatures, separate and autonomous. The second sets up the individual consent as the default basis for evaluating institutions, affiliations, memberships, and even personal relationships. Both, in Deneen's view, misrepresent how human beings relate to one another, that I agree with, and both lead us to inexorably towards transhumanism. The ideal that emerges from liberal ideology is that of perfectly free individual making perfectly free choices. No one is making perfectly free choices. Like, we're all socialized, and for a lot of people who are natural slaves, Aristotelian politics, I think, strikes again. Like, I just what makes yes, liberalism can lead to transhumanism, but again, this is the social technics argument, because like now I have technology that can manufacture consent, or I suddenly one day a group chat can get orders on twitter.com and we can talk about data centers for like 2 days straight. And it's just like the transhumanist aspect of this, and this is what I was talking with Gio yesterday, is that we are a species of fish that knows that we are swimming in water, and we can interrogate what water is. And some of us may be like, well, what if we didn't need the water to breathe? What if I didn't have to swim to continuously have water and oxygen flowing through my gills? Like, these are all sorts of questions that kind of get posited here. But at the same time, what liberalism, at least modern liberalism, has divorced us from, this is why I told him like the liberalism of Locke is so different than what we have today, is that we have divorced ourselves from any communitarian or identitarian understanding of self. And some arguments that our friends on maybe the more HBD side of things would say is that Northwestern Europeans and Anglos especially have a high propensity to not be as identitarian or close-minded towards their own race as other people. And that could be a genetic problem.
Yeah, keep in mind that transhumanism, I look at that more as a social revolution akin to the Industrial Revolution or the Information Revolution.
Yeah.
It will take the shape of whatever civilization it hits. Like, we tend to discuss transhumanism in a European or white framework. and it's all about reaching the stars and unlocking human potential and all that. But there's an Indian
Which is
version of this.
idealistic.
Yeah, guys, there's a Chinese version of this that is not pretty. There's an Indian version of this. They all got smartphones too. How do they use smartphones differently than we do? We all know how they do it. So like
You
the
can go
problem,
on Twitter.com.
yeah, the problem is that once this is deployed in whatever the civilization or race, again, it's going to look different. It's going to look worse everywhere else, just like every other technological, revolution that's ever existed. And I guess that's what I was trying to get at in my interview. And to his credit, this is when Nick Land gets to. He served the inverse of Ray Kurzweil, who talks about the singularity as an inevitable but beneficial event, whereas my reading of Nick Land is that it is also inevitable. You might as well be an accelerationist at that point, but it's bad. But you actually need to believe that's inevitable to do something about it. And I kind of think that the author's a bit too idealistic in the sense that, he says that he's a Luddite. I know we like to play around
Well,
with
he said he
terms.
wasn't a Luddite.
Oh,
Yeah.
But he's kind of, he wants to figure out what he can do about it. And my problem with the whole revealed preference argument I was making, which is like, I don't know. Like I detect something in there in a lot of these people that's like, we can do something about this to stop it. I would rather it not exist. I'm like, I'm not even interested in having that conversation. I think it's going to barring thermonuclear war at a global scale, it seems that there's so much money and so much interest and so much secret interest involved in this and gene editing and everything. I'm like, it's going to happen. What the fuck do we do about it? And I mean, I asked that question seriously. Not, oh, it could happen. What should we do? Should I stockpile wheat? I'm like, no. This is going to happen in your lifetime and it's fucked up. And like, we're not talking about it as if we're convinced it's even going to happen. I think that's a problem.
It already is.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even like this is the even for instance, the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War, he had said like, hey, like we're gonna just waive and change some rules to where like BPC 157 and other peptides are more accessible to our warfighters. It's just like that's transhumanist. That's genetic and biological and pharmacological modification. We know that we were experimenting with this in the 80s and 90s during the Cold War. We talked about like quote unquote super soldiers. Like it's a prominent feature of our science fiction. And God knows that they're probably already trying it and or doing it. Like any conversation that we're having about this technology, DARPA has probably got like 20 years of research that's ahead of the game that we're not talking about. And so are the Chinese, so are the Israelis, so are the Indians.
I wanted to get to this part here. Here we go.
Yeah, go for it.
He talks about, and this is, I wanted to give this as an example. And I know this will be a controversial part, but he says, or he's quoting someone here rather, says the contraceptive pill is the first transhumanist technology because that was a total paradigm shift in what medicine is for, author Mary Harrington said in a 2023 interview, because it doesn't set out to fix something that's wrong with me, like a broken arm or a kidney. That's not working properly. It sets out to break something that's working properly in accordance with desire. Transhumanist author Anders Sandberg. By the way, it's good to read this book just to figure out how many transhumanist authors there are. I had no idea that this many people were writing so much shit. But the transhumanist author Anders Sandberg, embraces this shift, proposing a volitional approach to medicine that treats disease as a failure. It's like NRX stuff. A failure of optimal function or desired functionality. Under this model, a normal menstrual cycle could be an indicator of health or a disorder to be treated, depending on the patient's attitude towards it. So really, at the baseline of this whole thing is this drive towards personal sovereignty. And this is why I think it would be, and we kind of got to this in the interview, why it would be so popular with women and feminists. We were talking about what xenofeminism, why is that not the natural endpoint of feminism? Why isn't it just having total insane control over your body? That they already are used to making that argument with abortion illogically, so it doesn't fucking matter. It's mine, and I'm in charge. This body is in charge. So that's I really just think that's its own philosophy, or there was some kind of demarcation or break from traditional liberalism into this. And this is like the starting point of what's going to be something way, way wilder, which is like just an inward directed sovereignty. Like sovereignty as we know it is sort of standing against an opposition or standing against what is surrounding you and saying, I stand alone and I stand apart. But this is like sovereignty projected inwards towards yourself, which is so much more maddening. It's like you're trying to prove your sovereignty to yourself. You're convinced you have it to the rest of the world, and you have these human rights. And so you just need to keep arguing with yourself and going down these insane pathways sort of insecurely. I don't know. That just seems like something else, something we'll have a name for in 50 years. And I don't know, maybe I'm looking too far. Maybe I'm just talking shit, but. So we talk about, he's got a part on IVF here. We kind of talked about IVF.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time, I think, on the reproductive aspect of this, which I mean, I do agree with. I mean, I don't want to say I come from this sphere, but I read a lot of it and I employed some of it in my late teens, early 20s. It's like the manosphere guys are right when they say that like the most consequential thing that we've ever done to the human species isn't like the atom bomb, it is the pill. And it has fundamentally like changed the dating game and the dynamics and how we interact with women and sex and reproduction. And so it's just like, again, a self-reference. Are we referring to that as a scriptural term, or like our own separation from God? Or are you doing something else? Personal sovereignty is attracted to any organism wired to expect a different kind of organism to exercise authority over it. Women, children, brown. Like, I mean, this is true. Like, this is what makes the arguments about oppressor, oppressee, right? The whole thing in liberalism is like groups that have been historically, been ruled over or have had to submit to an authority figure. Like, of course, that's going to be appealing. But I mean, it's the same thing that I think you and I, Dimes, have talked about all the time, where it's like the oldest sales pitch in the book is like, don't you want to be better? Yeah,
and that was a great line from American Psycho. Patrick Bateman is like, you don't always be better, be more in shape. And it's like, it is true.
Yeah.
Like there is no achievable ideal version of even yourself, because once you start down that path, it just recedes further and further away from you. And that's, I mean, if you want to get into Jacques Lacan and the idea of the lack, it feels like you're haunted by this thing that, like, or desiring machines with Deleuze and Guattari. Like, what are these mechanisms?
Yeah, the desiring machine to produce.
Yeah, or like to like, because the Marxists are following capitalism all the way to the roots, which is, wait a minute, why do we even desire things that we don't have? Like, what is that? Because they understand it's not even just economic; it's like bio-spiritual or something. But that's anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things we didn't get to in the book, of course, or in the interview section was, of course, he talks a lot about the transhumanist temptation being also things that we've seen throughout all the time. Like, there has always been the consequence of engaging with things that are greater than ourselves. I mean, he kind of takes this with the Nephilim. He also, again, with transhumanism, he also looks at this again, because this is all a new emerging technology. We only really can explore this through science fiction. So we have, Childhood's End gets explored, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Ancient Aliens, Ridley Scott's Prometheus. All these things play a role into how shall we, look at ourselves and how shall we engage in it. So, like for Quay, the author, he makes the comparison that like to replace God is just a secularized form of divination or divinization or theosis. So rather than to be commune and be part of the qualities of God, instead we will replace our conceptions with God and to become God-like ourselves. To which she's like, oh, this could be true very quickly, and like, why not worry? We'll just leave it be, and we'll just let it go that way. And so they want that to be the case. And even then, even it's funny, he mentions the Satanic Temple being like, we want the symbol of the eternal rebel to also utilize technology. That way we can support all of our ways to rage against order.
Yeah, I know we're getting over 2 hours now. There's something I wanted to mention, this other book that I read that I thought fit into this, and I think the area where it could have fitted in before is long since passed. But there's this book that I thought was really interesting when I read it, and I'm gonna say a name, and you're all gonna laugh. But the book's called The Revolutionary Phenotype by J.F. Garepi. All right.
That wasn't the book I was thinking of.
What this guy?
I was thinking of Selective Breeding and the Birth of Philosophy.
Oh, I mean, that one's not even interesting like this.
It's a PhD
honestly.
thesis. It's not.
It is, but like to me, it's I don't know. Like I look at that almost like historical fiction in a lot of ways. Like if I heard someone say something about it. They said this is the most fun I've ever had reading a thesis, and I said that means it's bad. You shouldn't have fun reading it. Shut the fuck up. If you're having fun, if you're hooting and hollering when you're reading someone's PhD thesis, it's written in a retarded way. It's not real. You're just that's a cope to say like, oh yippee, wow, I can't believe he said that. It's like, yeah, but it's not real. This isn't a serious thing. And we're talking about Constant Alamari, who's a Selective Breeding and the Birth of Philosophy, which we covered that. That
was the text I was thinking of when I was like, oh, what would be the good book to read in response to this? But I mean, there's another transhumanist. Like I want to read now the transgender to transhuman. I really want to read that one just from this like not gay Jewish guy who has a robot second wife in the wings.
But revolutionary theory, if I can just
go for it.
Explain what goes on in it. It's a very short book. You can get through it very fast, but I'm gonna butcher it in trying to describe it. But I think this might have even it was and is Garepi's area of focus. He's in bioengineering type shit. He's a biologist, and so it starts with this theory called RNA world theory, which I guess is debated within biological circles, but it's this idea that there was a point in the development in the construction, I guess, of Earth that there was no DNA, there was only RNA, which was a much simpler protein. And, it was just in the primordial ooze, it was bubbling around and replicating itself. And through a process that probably took millions of years, it innovated DNA. And DNA was originally subservient to RNA. And there was a point where it was just RNA, and then one day where DNA showed up. Now, why did it just show up? Well, because it was being used as a tool by RNA to facilitate its own replication. And it was completely subservient. And then and this is where it gets almost metaphysical, but it said at some point there's a switch that the tool used to reproduce somehow became embodied as the prime replicator. It became the thing that made RNA subservient to it, because we have RNA in our bodies all over the place. Yeah. We're full of RNA, but it is just this sort of lesser protein, and obviously DNA, it could code more information, it could replicate better, and the tool, it's not like people hear that and they think, okay, that's AI taking over. And he's clear to say it's not that. And he spends the last third of the book writing out a scenario for what he's talking about. It would take place across tens of thousands or even millions of years, but it would be human beings surrendering their reproductive drive to something else that is better at reproducing or and helping us reproduce better, and then we become subservient to that. So he was thinking more along the lines of like IVF clinics and things like that, or a futuristic version of that, where it's like a combination of IVF and CRISPR and all this stuff. It's like this thing that can help us produce humans, so we don't need to worry about it anymore. In our pursuit of eugenics, we surrender this sort of ontological reproductiveness to the tools, and then those end up becoming the main things that replicate, and we only exist to service that. And at a certain point, we become to these machines or these reproductive entities what RNA became to DNA. And so I look, that's sort of the terms I'm thinking of here, where we're talking about transhumanism. It's like, is it in service of humanity? Is it in service of prolonging our life? But for what reason are we doing that? What is life? This is why it's so frustrating to talk to someone like me. I understand that. You start talking to me about this shit, and I'm doing the bit. I'm doing the Kant bod bit where I'm like, what is life? What do you mean by life? What do you mean by technology? What do you mean by time? I get it. I'm no fun. But really, we need to start thinking about that. Like, once you really start gaming this out, it becomes very mind-bending. And it starts now. It starts with stuff like this. It starts with things that maybe we can control. And I don't want to just surrender to the accelerationism. Like, there must be some way to cause enough problems. Or I think what helps is talking about it like this and introducing these dimensions to it that maybe people hadn't considered before. Like, what are the stakes? Why should this matter? It's easy to think it doesn't matter. The problem is so fucking big, you don't even see the shape of it. I understand that, and it's a shape you don't want to see. But I just think that there's an inevitability to it, but that increases the stakes. And I'm thinking into a future where you don't even recognize humans anymore. And does that matter? You know, of course, yes, that means there's still black people raping with knives in the subway. I know there's more immediate things right now, but I can walk and chew gum at the same time. I can care about Iran and Palestine and whether or not I'm going to become a goo man in a million years. I can do all these things because I'm a man of multitudes. Sorry, I gave a lot. I actually do think people should read The Revolutionary Phenotype. I'd like to know where it's wrong. Maybe I'm too into it. Maybe I'm too close to it. I interviewed J.F. Greppi about this like a couple of years back. And it wasn't about anything else he's done or alleged to have done. It was just
I have
about
not
the book.
read the books. I will reserve judgment until I read it. I think that there is a very valid question to be asked in all cases of transhumanism, which is what is to become of man. Because it's just like, I look at Silicon Valley now, I read what, those Yuval Harari types, and notice that they're all like a specific group, but like they really are just like, well, most of you will functionally be cattle. And it's just like, well, I don't want to be cattle. And I don't think that the average person the person who's concerned about these things or can think about them probably don't want to be cattle either. But I mean, when I look at basically the stratification of where politics is going and like the tech world, it's just like, well, I'm going to be wealthy enough to avoid the consequences of the Civil Rights Act. Most of you are going to be wage slaves who will pay to get made courtesy of an Amazon one-shot delivery drone to your like shitty flat. Like I feel like the cyberpunk dystopia is here in a lot of respects because I can walk, downtown Chicago and I can see trannies busking for money. And I want to just like really, I understand the desire to just like nuke the world. I get it.
Yeah, we're not allowed to do the cool cyberpunk stuff like being a wandering tech samurai on rollerblades. I mean, if I do that now, they'll look at me like I'm odd.
Yeah. It's not prayer. It's more of the Cyberpunk 2077 and not like Prayer of the Roller Boys or something like that. It's frustrating.
Yeah, what if it's like Cyberpunk 2077, but it's also every movie from the 1980s? And it's just like the shittiest version of New York.
I just want to, if that's the case, then just let me be like Paul Kersey from Death Wish. I don't ask for much.
It's crazy about we actually do live in the cyberpunk world because when they were writing Cyberpunk, they thought we would still be obsessed with like CRT TVs and fucking old VHS shit. I'm like, yeah, that's still around because we're retarded, right? I watch movies we still got VHS effects over it. If someone came to the world now, it's like, oh, cool, you still have like old, stupid, unintuitive tech. Yep, that didn't change.
Yeah,
Oh,
we still got the H1B system.
Oh, you got electric cars? What do they look like? Well, we got a truck that looks like it was designed in the 70s for a sci-fi movie for fucking Total Recall. Oh, cool. What a stupid world we live in.
You still use this antiquated tech? Yep, I know. We still got women in the workforce.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Tragic, I know.
It's like women became sluttier and meaner. We actually didn't predict that. I thought they would be... Yeah.
There's this like comedian guy that's just like 1950s man travels to the 2020s, and he's like, he's got some bits in there, but it's just like, it's just like, yeah, just imagine being like James Blish in the 1970s. He's like, oh, so science fiction like really is just the epitome of like Spenglerian decline. And he's like, yep. He's just like, women can have penises now. And he's like, yep, the world has truly ended.
It's the wildest thing. It's that women will sleep with every single man except for you. And that's the experience of every man. Every woman's the biggest whore on earth, but except for you, not you.
You're going to go home every night and tuck your kids into bed while some Twitter asshole calls you an incel for the 45th time.
Yep. That's that's the shit that keeps me going. I got a hater on Substack. And I don't know how he keeps finding me. It's like he keeps stumbling across me, but he keeps accusing me of being in the Peter Thiel network and being like a Bronze Age pervert guy. And I'm like,
it's like, sir, my ass doesn't, like flap in the wind. I think I'm not part of the network.
But also, it's like, I mean, you hate me enough to chase me around, but you don't hate me enough to know me. Like, one of the benefits of having a stalker like that is that they know a lot about what you say. I'm like, you just haven't read any of my shit at all, have you? You're just saying things to say them.
He just hates you for the love of the game.
Yeah, which I appreciate, because I love hate. I love hating. I love talking shit.
Speaking of hate, would you recommend this book to our audience?
Like I get where, here's how I would describe the book. It's taking a more like almost a spiritual approach, because he comes at it from a Christian perspective.
Yes,
and that's very clear all throughout. And so I haven't seen that before. I haven't seen the Christian perspective on just transhumanism. And he takes it very seriously. He mentions all this shit. I think there's some big questions that are left unanswered. I think it's if you've never read anything about it, yeah, you can read it. But I think that the way you and I are talking about it and the way the chat's talking about it, I just think that the depth of the issue wasn't explored sufficiently for me. But maybe it's not for me. Maybe it's for someone else.
And I mean, it's the first mainstream American Christian book on this. If you want, perhaps, I know Bishop Luke of Holy Trinity Monastery in Jordanville has written an article on AI, and he's building off of sort of the Eastern tradition. But Elder Emilianos of Simona Petra famously wrote Orthodox Spirituality and the Technological Revolution, which I would really recommend people read. Even if you're not Orthodox, it's just people lose their peace of mind, their self-control, their powers of contemplation, reflection, and turn outwards, becoming strangers to themselves. They become unthinking consumers, quote, slaves to images and information, and degenerate into real idolatry. And this is just it's like a 10-page PDF that you can read that came out last year. But I think it's worth, I told the author, I told Grayson, I think these kind of questions are going to go away anytime soon. And these debates about eugenics and technology and transhumanism versus, spirituality and, say apostolic Christianity, I think are not going to go away. They always pop their heads up on a liturgical calendar every year. So this will inevitably pop up again. But I now want to really read that Rothblatt book. So I'm excited for the next episode. But yeah, I mean, I'd recommend that you give it a read. And I'm sure that you guys can take it apart or look at it and maybe expand on some of these arguments better than we did.
I think what he did in this book, and he's not just to blame for this, it's a lot of people who do this. They run in one direction towards transhumanism, which is to relate to everything, and say transhumanism is this one, homogenous movement. But what we were trying to do, or I was trying to do earlier, was segment it up and say, okay, what is transhumanism? Like, there is this longevity movement, but then the longevity movement is broken down into your body, making the body live forever, then the mind live forever. But then there's human augmentation, like what is driving it? Like, and I think you actually, if you want to write a book, it can't be about transhumanism. It needs to be one of those segments, because there's enough to talk about just with that. Like, you can write an entire book just about the drive to want to live forever and what we do about that. And then, when does body augmentation preserve life versus improve life? Like, what is the philosophical argument for, like, you should only be able to replace something that is broken and can't make it any better? So then you're almost making an argument that you should not be able to improve your life as you get older. Like, you can really unpack this, and you could really drill down into these component problems, into these lower tier problems. But like, if you're just going after transgenderism, it's too big, it's too vague. And he really went all the way with the vagaries, saying, well, it's also liberalism, it's also capitalism, it's all the stuff. I can't do anything with that.
I really, my biggest critique is, I really wish he narrowed this down more.
And for him and everyone, I think everyone, and that's why when I see Mark Andreessen go the other direction, saying that this is all great, we should be optimistic about tech, I'm like, it's too big and vague. Like, saying, feel better about the way things are going. No,
be specific about what tech you want to use.
Yeah, let's just talk about space travel, and only talk about space travel, and then talk about the technological singularity and how they relate. But I just feel like they're not treating these topics seriously if they're grouping them all together and saying this big progress is bad. Well, we don't even accept the premise that progress exists. Like, you need to like buy into all these other frameworks that are ironically liberal themselves. But I'm like, if you start rejecting all that, then like break it down into the component parts and discuss what it is, because everything is being challenged. Everything is on the table right now. Like, we are in, like, people are correct to be deeply upset about the status quo, but it's because there's 100 different things that are all being deconstructed and reconfigured and reformatted into these like little fucking Shrike monsters that seem completely unfamiliar. But anyway, like transhumanism, yeah, like I almost want to reject that word, almost. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like, but or maybe that's the paradigm that we're entering, and that's why it's inevitable, because it's the expression of trying to escape. And maybe we've never tried to escape more than the 20th century and onward. Escape the planet, escape humanity, escape our bodies, escape all limitations.
This is partially why I found, this is ironically what Moynihan discusses at the end of Spinal Catastrophism, is like, we should escape, and by escape I mean we should annihilate all life in the universe so no one else can suffer. That's his version, which it was a very nihilist ending. Whereas I think Land and others would just be like, no, we need to escape, because actually nothing human surviving in the near future is good, actually. And it's like, someone make the positive argument for that. Maybe this Rothblatt character will do that for us. But like, again, so many of these debates and these conversations get lost for vagaries, and we're not ever pinned down on one specific issue. Like transgenderism, like we can debate that, talk about that all day. It's like, the Transgender Industrial Complex is a great book on that very issue. It's just like, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry that also has like deep ties to Israel and also deep ties to like the Sacklers. It's just like, we should be talking about this. And also, why is JB Pritzker's like family kind of like all a bunch of trannies? Like, these are some interesting observations to make. And and like, that's technically transhumanism, because like, I can see trannies on twitter.com tell me that this is the most cyberpunk thing that they've ever done.
I say this from Bulbous Persona: Homo sapiens escapes the sapiens.
That's literally what Noel Yuval Harari wants, is to escape it.
We're just homos.
Yeah, we're just gonna be, gay Jews.
You think that the future can't possibly get more gay and Jewish, and you'd be wrong. Revolutionary Phenotype speaks of this. Okay, I have to get going now. And so everyone, thank you. I think that's a great way to close it out. I hope everyone enjoyed the new format. I think this was a wonderful episode. I had a great time recording.
I had a lot of fun. It was good. So I guess we're gonna do that Rothblatt book next month.
Yeah. Let's get our hands on that.
Yeah, let's do that. I'll find us a PDF and get to it. All right. Well, we'll see you next month. We got a great book. I'm going to be wearing some Do You Even Read merch pretty soon. When I'll be live somewhere next month. I think y'all will really enjoy it. I'll be wearing a Do You Even Read shirt.
I know where it is, but I won't tell.